Is this how this has to be done? Compromise on the part of progressives. Like, motherfucker, these are people fighting for their lives. Okay? The compromise is not dying. Like, holy shit. Like, I'm sorry. This is like, this whole thing reeks of cis privilege. Even if it's like good intentions from the very start. Just compromise on human rights. The answer is no. Well, wait. Is JJ McCullough anti-trans? He's many things, but I haven't seen his anti-trans shake. He's part of the LGBTQ community. Like, he's gay. I didn't think he was anti-trans. Is he that conservative? Dave Rubin is anti-trans. No, I know Dave Rubin's anti-trans. JJ's not a fan of gay pride parades. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna push gay pride parades on somebody. It's like, I love them because I just love parties, but like, if someone's like, I don't like gay pride parades, I'm not gonna be like, well, you're homophobic. Look up JJ McCullough National Article Review on Trans Community. Done and done. If so, shame on you, JJ. Is it time for a compromise on transgenderism? Is that it? Excuse me for 2 seconds, everybody. I have to read JJ McCullough's article, and then we'll move on to something most pleasant. JJ McCullough is Canadian. You'll know about him if you watch his channel. He's the one that frequently says the word "aboot" with that very, very thick accent. I doubt many Americans would disagree that the country's conversation about gay rights is far more mature and considered than it was 2 decades ago. Today, there exists a broad understanding that homosexual people are unavoidable and common, present in all corners and demographics of American life. Through education and especially exposure, homosexuality is no longer regarded as bizarre, threatening, or mysterious. Even if we remain unsure about what makes a minority of men and women gay, only the tiniest fringe still consider that orientation is something worth trying to fix. When states attempt to ban homosexual conversion therapy, as California is trying to do at the moment, it feels like anachronistic performance. It is not performance. They're very real things. Kids go there and they're tortured. It is a very good thing they're closing down conversion therapy schools. Talk to Izzy Bear 713. She's a survivor of them. She underwent torture in those places. Like, fuck you. Oh, I already hate this. Disinterest in judging homosexuality is not an attitude government has coerced Americans into. It is a product of the free people's informed knowledge. No, it's something that was hard fought. People died. Fuck, read up on this shit before you write about it. To the extent that America is still having any political debate about homosexuality, it has evolved into a more substantial conversation about religious liberty. Motivated by their constitutionally protected freedom of belief, today some Christians seek assurance of their right to opt out of participating in activities they see as condoning or endorsing homosexual acts or behavior, chiefly same-sex weddings, which are considered destructive to both the individual and broader society. These are difficult debates, but are by far more useful than those of the early eras, which mostly center around the democratic judgment of gay lifestyle, untethered to any tangible constitutional principle or policy objective. Wow. I mean, just spoken like basically a privileged white Canadian talking about this and saying like, oh, America, it's over. Gay people have full rights now. The fight is done. Looking at the state of America's transgender debate, I often wonder if things are destined to unfold in a similar way. At present, it feels we're still in the immature demagogic phase. In some quarters, it remains fashionable to act theatrically repulsed by transgender people, emphasize their weirdness, and make populist appeals to the preposterousness of women asking to be called him, or surgeons amputating penises and so forth. Yet this seems more cathartic than anything, in the same way that shouty judgment of gays did a generation earlier. As with homosexuality in the 1980s and 1990s, the loud revulsion of critics conceals a fading interest in actually attempting to solve transgenderism, as even those offended by it seem to be quietly regard purported cures as quackish and authoritarian. Though transgenderism is by far a rarer phenomenon than homosexuality, I think most adults can admit that it does seem like a rather persistent aspect of humanity. Most people probably recall a transgender person making at least some minor appearance in their life. If we concede that transgenderism is not going away and is not something that anyone intends to exert effort towards ending, then Americans, especially conservative ones, should reflect on their cultural, honest, and fair attitude towards homosexuality and acknowledge that the most sensible path out of the present acrimony will probably require similar compromise. Some degree of cultural ceasefire and consensus seems the only path forward to both maintain a degree of pride while avoiding a more radical, disruptive societal transformation. I mean, I guess I have to say that this seems like more of an olive branch than I would consider this to be outright transphobia. It seems more like he's trying to appeal to what I'm sure he realizes by having to interact with them consistently are a pretty like socially conservative group, which is conservatives, right? Part 1 of the compromise will be borne by cultural conservatives and traditionalists. It asks for broad tolerance for the reality that transgender men and women exist and to be entitled to basic human dignity just like everyone else. This does not mean having to morally endorse behavior many believe runs contrary to God's plan for a just and healthier society, but it does imply that acts like ostentatiously calling someone by the pronouns they don't want or belittling their personal struggle are boorish and petty. Well, yeah, they also contribute to an atmosphere that leads to really high rates of suicide. It means acknowledging that arbitrary discrimination against transgender people is a cruel bigotry like any other. But part 2 of the compromise requires sacrifice on the part of progressives who are currently overplaying their hand in an effort to strong-arm sweeping social change as a flex of their power. Ooh, go on. There must be a halt in the use of state authority to impose accommodations of transgenderism in a fashion far more totalitarian than is rationally justified. Transgender people constitute a tiny minority of Americans who, in the vast majority of cases, are explicitly eager to opt into the broad two-gender social order of our civilization is based around. What's going on here? Tolerance does not necessitate a purge of any and all public manifestations of the gender binary in the name of exception to the rule. So, wrong. It's actually science. Yeah, it's turning out that our scientific understanding of gender and how it works is becoming more and more revelatory, in that the idea of addressing it as simply a binary is false. It's wrong. It's something that, if you are going to keep believing, is going to keep you in the Stone Ages. Just like the idea in the past that homosexuality used to be a mental disorder. Accepting transgenderism as an inescapable human phenomenon does not mean that there's nothing left to learn about it, or that cautious or even skeptical attitudes towards purported manifestations of it are never legitimate. Oh my. In particular, the risk of psychologically and physically damaging children by, and here we go, okay, it's hello transphobic, by physically damaging children by encouraging them or enabling them to embrace transgender identities before pubescene must be acknowledged as a valid concern backed by credible evidence. It has been. It's like that discussion is over with. It's done. At this point, if you're still saying this, like, how old is this article? May 9, 2018. I mean, unless your tone has completely changed. Protecting children from the confusing, anxious, and dangerous world of adult sexuality and sexual identity before the developing minds can fully conceptualize its complexities is not bigotry. Absolutely 100% is. You're endangering trans children. You're contributing right now to the misinformation campaigns that leads to their high rates of suicide. You are endangering trans kids with this fucking article. That's fucking horrible. Shame on you. It is not a good sense and a sovereign right of every parent. It should be the responsibility of the public education system as well. Today's purveyors of identity politics cause acrimony because they seem determined to invent and prosecute new accusations of intolerance against those otherwise trying to behave properly. You know, the good ones, the good trans. Embracing open prejudice can seem cynically comforting response amongst those feeling doomed to be judged regardless, because transgenderism affects few people and therefore provokes relatively low social stigma. It seems to be the issue on which many on the right prefer to let loose their inner reactionary, even more when they further rationalize the petty tyranny on the left. American history teaches us that neither the radical nor the regressive who are ultimately vindicated in the response to the cultural disruption, but rather those cautious conservatives who assigned themselves the difficult task of thoughtfully working through the new and unexpected cause of preserving the social order as peaceful and free as the one that came prior, who will rise to that task? All around, fuck you, to be totally honest. And yeah, you did have me in the first half, to be totally frank. When I saw this, I was like, you know what? There's not going to be a lot of, like, building of bridges. And if there is a gay conservative, a prominent gay conservative, who's going to come forward and talk about this issue, and if you can get more people on board and or even change a couple people's minds, that is a net win, especially if he's going to start making things to be more acceptable amongst conservative circles, or even starting the conversation amongst conservative circles, stuff of that nature. But then when you start vilifying one of the most, like, dangerous aspects of this near the end, like, holy shit, it's like, and also, is this how this has to be done? Compromise on the part of progressives. Like, motherfucker, these are people fighting for their lives, okay? The compromise is not dying. Like, holy shit. Like, I'm sorry, this is like, this whole thing reeks of cis privilege, even if it's like good intentions from the very start. Just compromise on human rights. The answer is no. That's the thing. That's the people on the other end of this fight, the same fight that, yes, helped gain the privilege that you as a gay Canadian have, in terms of you not facing the same levels of bigotry that is happening to the trans community. Sure, that fight has come at the hands of, like, people's lives, the sacrifices, the fucking bricks that were thrown. to make this possible. It didn't happen because of all of a sudden there was a vote or a change in a policy made at the legislative level. People had to fight and die, and they still are. That's the thing. They're still fighting and they're still dying. Also, Google Stonewall. Motherfucker. If you want us to advertise your channel or work, please go to weareserfs.com and email us a 20 to 30 second ad, and we'll take it on to the end of one of our videos to help promote your leftist channel or progressive something. Whatever you do.
To our gods, An-Ra, Xander Corvus, Schlatsky, we look to the stars for your divine guidance. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are merely puppets for your amusement. To our lords, Trevor R., Alexander Thaler, Hans Josephine, Ryan Lubin, Jimothy K. Meeblebeeps Jr., Bisexual Black Gamer, and Tofox, we shall carry your banner into the fog of war. To our Knights of the Round Table, Josh Mickelson, Zach Christensen, Todd Buckingham, Todd Lajeunesse, Political Puppy, Jimmy Bignuts, Andreas Chiringuito, Yoppie, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Thomas Barrington, J. Fraser Cartwright, Goofalankius, Melissa Murphy, Nicholas Marks, Radical Maniac, The Great Pudini, Kale Kotka, Anthropophagic, Serene 42, Chronic de Hemphog, Phone Jenny, Incosin, Constance Joyce Lacheris, and Ramon Acosta. We drink with you and we salute you.